Hi, good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm presenting from today, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I've been wanting to do more research and showcase our records on Italian migration for some time now. I have a personal connection as my great-grandfather Mario Strano migrated from Sicily to North Queensland in 1921, and we hold records on him in the collection. Today I'll be showcasing records from the National Archives collection. Italian migration is a huge topic, and I'm really just going to be giving you a taste of what we hold. The National Archives collection is made up of records created by the Australian Commonwealth Government, so they mostly date from Federation in 1901. There's a National Archive office in collection in each state and territory of Australia. And the records I'm showing you today on the screen, they're really quite word heavy. You don't have to read every word on the screen. I'll read out the relevant excerpts for you. And all the records I'm showing you are digitised. So if you like, you can go onto our record search database after the seminar and you can read the records in more depth if you're interested. I'm also happy to share the slides as a PDF document after the seminar. Eve will pop our email into the chat and you can contact us after the webinar and I can share those with you. Okay, hopefully everyone can see the slides. Okay, this is a brief overview of some of the records I'm going to be talking to you about this morning. So we're going to look at the early history of Italian migration to Australia, the cane fields of North Queensland, a little bit of the Black Hand and fascism, World War II and post-war migration. So it's a lot to cover in only a short period of time, so it really is just a snapshot. Italy has had an association with Australia since the 16th century when Italians sailed with Spanish and Portuguese explorers. In 1676, Father Vittorio Riggio wrote to Rome from Manila requesting permission to establish a Roman Catholic mission in Australia. By the time he received approval, Riggio had died and with him hopes of establishing an Italian outpost. He'd also drawn up a map of the new continent based on his conversations with Dutch sailors, and you can see this map on the screen here. It's from the Vatican Museum, this image. Italians Antonio Ponto and James Mario Matra were with Captain James Cook when he arrived in Botany Bay in 1770. Matra went on to play a role in the establishment of Sydney, whose suburb Matraville takes his name. That's something I learnt while researching this seminar. I didn't know that. Giuseppe Tusa was one of a number of Italians who arrived with the First Fleet in 1788. He was a Sicilian convict who was deported from England. And these early arrivals were followed by missionaries and then by seasonal workers. The Catholic Church came to Australia in the late 1830s, and the first Catholic mission was established on Minjerribah, just Stradbroke Island, just off Brisbane. 3 Italian priests became some of the first missionaries to Aboriginals in Australia when they established a mission in 1843 at a disused military station at Dunwich. The mission was, however, short-lived, with the last priest, Father Vicari, leaving in 1847. Hundreds of Italians were lured to Victoria in the 1850s gold rushes. In 1854, Italian Raffaello Carboni, a participant in the Miners' Rebellion at Ballarat, recorded the only eyewitness account of the infamous Eureka Stockade, and you can see his account on the left there, published edition. Carboni was one of the 12 defendants charged with high treason, but he was later acquitted. To the right is a page from Carboni's naturalisation file, which is held in our collections from 1855. He returned to Italy only a short time later in 1856. This slide tells the story of some of the earliest Italian migrants to Queensland to work in the sugarcane fields. It was written in 1933 by the Vice-Consul for Italy at a time when racial tensions were high. His letter to Prime Minister Joseph Lyons in June 1933, it states, in 1891, agents were sent to Italy to canvass the agricultural districts and to engage families of peasants who were granted free passage to Australia and a 3-year contract on arrival, chiefly scrub cutting in the Herbert River district. About 350 Italians, including men, women and children, left by the SS Jumna and landed at Townsville towards the end of 1891. Italians are therefore not intruders in the sugar industry. They have been requested, invited and canvassed to come here. The above proves also how wrong is the contention that Italians have not pioneered the sugar industry, but simply reaped the benefits of the hardships of the original settlers. Many of the original Italian settlers are still alive and still residing in North Queensland, where they reared large and prosperous Italian families, which reach already to the third generation. This is a file from an Attorney General's minute paper from 1933. Okay, Italian migration to Australia was sporadic during the 19th and early 20th century. In 1901, the census recorded that there were 5,679 Italian-born residents who were mostly living in Victoria and New South Wales. The predominant pattern of settlement was chain migration at this time, so a male relative would arrive first, establish himself, and then sponsor the passage of his wife, children, and siblings. The majority of pioneers settled in rural Australia. The earliest significant community was established in the 1850s around the Victorian gold mining town of Daylesford. In the decades that followed, settlements sprang up across the country, and amongst the largest were New Italy in northern New South Wales and the Western Australian mining towns of Kalgoorlie and Boulder. In 1906, the CSR, the Commonwealth Sugar Refinery, suggested to farmers that the south of Europe was the best place to recruit replacement labour after the deportation of South Sea Islanders. This meant that from quite early on, the Italians were regarded not as settlers as much as a force of cheap labour, which were here to replace another cheap source of labour, the South Sea Islanders. By 1916, the Italians had become an important factor in the Johnston River district around Innisfail. By way of hard work, thrift and pooling their resources, they were soon able to own many farms. And in the same period, Italians began growing fruit in the Stanthorpe region as well. Post-World War I, Italian migration was not exactly encouraged. In 1921, Italian immigration to both the USA and Australia was restricted. This letter in our collection from 1922, it's from the Chamber of Commerce and Progress Associations on the Atherton Tableland. It's to Prime Minister Hughes. It's from a file titled Protest Against Unrestricted Influx of Italians and Other European Aliens into North Queensland. It says this conference views with grave concern the large influx of Italians, Greeks and aliens into the coastal areas north of Townsville, believing such to be against the best interests of the Commonwealth, as it adversely affects the British element and tends to settle an alien race in the richest province in Australia, thereby weakening the defence of our country at its most vulnerable point. The 1925 Immigration Act created a quota system limiting people from selected countries, and the number of Italian immigrants allowed into Australia was strictly limited. And migration during the Depression years, it was generally just for family reunification. Okay, these particulars of the nationality of migrants for the period July 1926 to March 1927, it accompanied a statement of no assistance or encouragement is given by the Commonwealth Government to induce Italian migrants to come to Australia. It shows how many arrivals from each quarter, and you can see there's not many. Lists Greeks, Italians, Yugoslavs, Maltese. And the newspaper clipping on the right is from the Daily Guardian in November 1927. It states that the Italian government has complied with Australia's request that no more migrants be given passports for Australian industrial centres, while unemployment continues to be serious. Those who did arrive had to register with the authorities as an alien. We have these beautiful travel documents in our collection dating from 1909 to 1941. There's almost 4,000 items in our Queensland office. They're all searchable on our public database record search by name. Okay, so we're now going to look at the history of Italians working in the sugar industry in North Queensland. This statement from Queensland Premier Morgan Smith reads, In the Herbert and Johnstone River districts of North Queensland, Italian nationals are in the majority and naturally give preference of employment to their own compatriots. If therefore such people are permitted to take up land on equal terms with British subjects, there is no doubt that within a short period of time, probably within the next 20 years, North Queensland will be in danger of becoming, in fact, an Italian colony secured by means of peaceful penetration. The Italians were thought of as very good workers and were greatly favoured by farmers of all nationalities. They were prepared to work longer and for lower wages than their Australian counterparts. However, by 1925, the gradual increase in strength of the Italians within the sugar industry meant that the Australians began to fear that they would lose control and that the Italians would eventually run the entire industry. It was at this time that hostility toward the Italian community began. The first attempt was by the unions, which decreased the number of cutting tickets given to Italians. This was followed by the State Sugar Industry Award, which gave preference of employment in the field and the mills to union workers. This is an Attorney General's minute paper from our collection describing the Gentleman's Agreement of 1930. It says in June 1930, the Australian Workers' Union, the Australian Sugar Producers Association and the Queensland Cane Growers Council entered into an agreement known as the Gentleman's Agreement, providing that at least 75% of the men engaged as cane cutters shall be British cutters. Just to emphasise as well, the term British cane cutter deemed only to include those born in Australia, not those who had been naturalised subjects or British subjects born overseas. It was those who had been naturalised as British subjects but then denied work as they were not Australian born that a large amount of the correspondence in our collection relates to. In 1933, a petition was presented to the Governor-General and also to the King by a number of naturalised British subjects of Innisfail, stating that although they were members of the AWU, they had been excluded from employment in the sugar industry. It says, your petitioners therefore humbly pray that your Excellency, as the representative of the King, to whom we took the oath of allegiance, take steps to see that his naturalised subjects obtain British justice and that they be protected in their rights to equal consideration in the matter of employment by the abolition or alteration of the Gentleman's Agreement relating to the sugar industry in North Queensland. Luigi Denisi of the Italian Progressive Club wrote to the Governor-General Sir Isaac Isaacs regarding the petition in May 1933. He says, I humbly suggest that you endeavour to have the petition presented as early as possible, otherwise a grave injustice will be done to many British subjects during the 1933 season by reason of the Gentleman's Agreement. This agreement excludes from cane cutting work foreign-born British subjects to the extent of 75% in all sugar areas of North Queensland. A very large number of these naturalised British subjects are married men with Australian-born families, some of whom have been in Australia over 30 years and have been naturalised over 25 years. During the long period of their lives in North Queensland, they have felled the scrub, prepared the land and planted sugarcane, and in fact have greatly assisted in the development of the North. I trust that His Excellency, after considering the circumstances, will see that justice is obtained for his petitioners, by guaranteeing them their rights as British subjects to freedom in the matter of employment without reference to the place of their birth on account of which they are at present being victimised. After being assured by the Governor-General that he would form a reply to Denisi, and with none being forthcoming, Denisi wrote again to the Governor-General elaborating. He says, the position we unfortunate naturalised subjects are now placed in and enduring is beyond all rights and fairness, as we are now having surrendered our citizens' rights to the British Empire and Australia, casting away from all connections and consideration to the country we were born in. We find our position acute, as being debarred from earning an existence in the industries of Queensland and all our earnest appeals for fair treatment being defeated. We are now placed similar to the persons on a floating iceberg, at the mercy of the wind and waves, with no redress or any assistance from the country we have sworn our allegiance to, and no consideration to our rights from the country we were born in. What are we to do? If a war was declared tomorrow between Great Britain and Italy, we would be expected to fight for England, and if conscription was enforced, we would be, and could be, forced to fight against the country of our birth. Yet realising these facts, we are segregated from the rights of civilisation, and citizenship rights debarred on account of our birthplace in a country we've sworn allegiance to. And fulfilling our obligations to the Australian Workers' Union, who is now party to the gentleman's agreement that is responsible for holding us out. There are many, many letters from our collection, very, very similar to this one, sent from Italian cane cutters and sent from the Vice Consul of Italy, all sorts of letters sent to the Governor-General and the Prime Minister. And I've chosen a few to read out because they're all really, really fascinating. This one here is an example from a person, McDonald. He was organising secretary of the Country and Progressive National Association in Cairns. He writes to the Prime Minister Lyons. I'll read a little bit out. It says, "It strikes a blow at the very principles of democracy and is foreign to any decent Australian's idea of British justice. The sugar organisations had to agree to it when first introduced, and now the majority of sugar growers would like to get rid of the agreement, but have not the courage to cry out in case the AWU would say you have broken your word." And so it drifts on. "The Italians or other foreigner who has become naturalised wonders what sort of a nation we are to make him swear the oath of allegiance, renounce his country, and pledge him to serve his newly adopted country in the event of a war. No nation can expect loyalty if they naturalise a man and then allow agreements to be made depriving that man of his right to be treated as a Britisher. All that the naturalised foreigner asks in a statement from the authoritative source saying that nobody or person can make an agreement and discriminate between a British-born and a naturalised British subject. He wants equality, and we should encourage him to assimilate our aims and ideas, not put up barriers and drive him into segregated colonies. He makes no claim for the man who is not naturalised. The Italian government can look after their own subjects. I've always found the Italians industrious, and very rarely do you see them on relief work or the dole. They are prepared to accept employers' decisions when they apply for work, but resent the injustice of discriminating under Clause 8 of the agreement. Trusting this matter will receive your consideration, and after the legal position has been reviewed, that you can do something on the lines suggested." Okay, this passionate letter from the naturalised Italians of the town of Ayr to the Governor-General, Sir Isaac Isaacs, states, "When we applied for naturalisation and paying for same, we were granted it. These papers give us the same right as a British-born subject, yet we are denied and looked upon as mere nothings by the Ayr Union. We wish to live up to the rule of the Union, but it's quite plain that they do not want us and accept to try and grind us like dirt. We do as much as any Australian for the upkeep of Australia. So can you, sir, answer why we are treated like dogs? We trust you will immediately look into this letter and stop such beastly treatment. We have endured almost as much as we can stand, and men can't govern their blood with their brains when such cowardly treatment is concerned." After all this protest and numerous follow-up letters, almost a year later, the Commonwealth's official response was, "It does not appear possible for the Commonwealth to take any action on behalf of the naturalised Southern Europeans. There is nothing in the State Act or award to prevent their employment. But so long as the employers and the union agree to discriminate against these employees, no action by the Commonwealth can compel the cane growers to employ these men." Luckily, the Denisi brothers' campaign did eventually work, and the parties did eventually decide to withdraw the agreement. Okay, so as I said, during the Depression years, Italian migration was restricted. This is an estimate of the Italian population in Australia in 1939. You can see here Queensland has almost double that of other states, with 15,000. Okay, so we're now going to look at another aspect of 1930s North Queensland. La Mano Nera, the Black Hand, it was the name given to a group of extortionists in 1930s North Queensland, linked to crimes ranging from kidnap to murder. The objective of the gang was simple: they wanted money. They would send extortion letters to cane farmers using the term Black Hand as a threat. Many paid up, as the consequences were dire if you didn't. It was very difficult for the police, as the criminals were friends by day, enemies by night. Two men, Nicola Mamoni in Innisfail and Vincenzo D'Agostino in Ingham, were regarded as the leaders. In its attempts to extort money from members of the Italian community, the gang resorted to violence, where cars and houses were attacked and in some cases bombed. cane farmers were destroyed by fire and horses poisoned. The National Archives has a number of files relating to the activities of the Black Hand. And in relation to this topic, some of you may have seen the ABC documentary this year that featured the story of my great-grandfather, Mario Strano. This is a photo of the documentary. It's available on iView, and that's a photo of me filming last year in Giroux, a cane farming town west of Townsville. This is from a report on the tour of North Queensland in January 1937 by Inspector Wake of the Investigation Branch. It says the Italian communities in North Queensland are rapidly developing standards of conduct which should not be tolerated in any British community. The recent murders and cases of blackmail, the unwillingness of victims to report crime to the police owing to fear of reprisals, and the impudence of the known perpetrators or masterminds behind the crimes of murder, arson and blackmail necessitate immediate action by both the state and Commonwealth to combat this evil. By far the greater evil appears to be the Italian or continental characteristic of revenge, which unfortunately the police have been unable to suppress. The fear of intimidation which is known to exist in the minds of the Italians in North Queensland and their reluctance to appeal. Okay, so this is a letter to Prime Minister Menzies in December 1936 from Ingham. It clarifies, at present, several Sicilian farmers are in such a state of fright, and some of these have been blackmailed to such an extent that they are resolved to leave Australia and return home. They will give no information to the police, fearing revenge for any leakage. In the past, the police have not always been discreet in this respect. The police are helpless. Nobody knows anything, and interrogation of those likely to know reveals blank ignorance. British ideas of justice are just too good for this scum. This list from 20th of October 1933, it's from the Royal Consul General of Italy. It's a list of undesirable Italians residing in North Queensland whose moral behaviours appear to be very unsatisfactory. So there's lots of lists like this on files in the collection, listing Italians in North Queensland for either being undesirable or fascist or various other reasons. Okay, this resolution passed at the Ingham Chamber of Commerce details increased awareness of the issue. It's from 1939. It says that the attention of the Minister of the Interior be drawn to the fact that Italian farmers in this district have received a number of letters demanding money with threats of violence, and in consequence, reputable citizens are in fear of injury to themselves and families, that in the opinion of this chamber, such state of affairs would be most effectively dealt with by the deportation of all unnaturalised aliens convicted or reasonably suspected of sending such letters or being party thereto, and that the Minister be asked to take steps accordingly, and that if the Commonwealth has no power to take such steps, legislation be introduced giving such power. Okay, this letter here is from Senator Foll. It's regarding a local cane farmer, Rosario Russo. It says, Dear Senator, a few days ago I had a visit from a Mr. Rosario Russo, who is a very successful cane grower in this area. He is a Sicilian, one of the good ones. I may say he is at present a very worried individual. A few weeks ago he received a letter, presumably from the Black Hand, demanding the payment of £1,000 with the alternative of being killed if this demand was not met. I understand that he got in touch with the police and that a detective came up from Brisbane to make inquiries. Mr. Russo feels sure he knows who the man is behind the scenes and gave this individual's name to the detective, but of course no proof of this assertion could be got. With the result, the detective returned to Brisbane without being able to do anything. Mr. Russo has noticed in the papers the Act recently passed in Great Britain dealing with the members of the IRA, and is wondering if something similar could not be done in this country. I suggested that he might go to Townsville and we have a personal interview with you, but he emphatically declined, as he says his every movement is being watched and that he is frightened to make any movement in the open. He says that in spite of his family wishing to remain in Australia, he feels he will be compelled to sell out and return to Italy if nothing can be done to combat this menace. So D'Agostino was the Black Hand ringleader who terrorised and extorted Italian migrants across North Queensland, creating a culture of fear in the community. This is an ASIO file report regarding D'Agostino from 1937. And it tells us that he was conducting a bakery business in Innisfail. The story of D'Agostino is linked to my great-grandfather Mario Strano. There are 4 files in the National Archives on Mario Strano. Mario was born in 1903 in Sicily into a family of 10 children. They lived in the village of Zaffarana, which is on Mount Etna. He immigrated to Australia in 1921, first cutting cane before becoming a taxi driver. And there's a photo of his taxi with his 2 sons. One of those sons is my grandfather. He met his Spanish wife, Maria Canet, in Ingham, and they were married in 1928. Mario was targeted by D'Agostino, who wanted to use Mario's taxi for the various crimes they were committing. Mario was involved in 2 main incidents with the Black Hand using his taxi. One was driving 2 of D'Agostino's associates to a farm to extort money, and another was an abduction case. For all of D'Agostino's crimes, the one considered perhaps his most ruthless was his involvement in the kidnapping of teen Elizabeth Rosati in December 1932. Read this out. This is from D'Agostino's naturalisation file. It says 3 men named Mario Strano, Saverio Militano and Domenico Scarcella were arrested at Ingham and charged with adoption of a girl named Elizabeth Rosati, aged 13 and a half, from the custody of her parents at Hawkins Creek. When interviewing Strano on the matter, he informed me that D'Agostino and Scarcella had come to him on the car rank, and the latter had informed him that he was to take Militano and Scarcella to Seymour, and if he did not do so, he would have an account to him for his action. He was seen talking to Strano at this time and placed by another car driver named Capana. At Townsville the next day, Militano instructed Strano to inform D'Agostino on his return to Ingham of the safe arrival and that he had succeeded in getting possession of the girl. On the surface, it looks as though D'Agostino has nothing to do with it, but Mario's statement to police makes it clear that D'Agostino was involved. In 1933, Mario Strano and 2 other men were charged with abducting Elizabeth Rosati and stood trial at the Supreme Court in Townsville. Militano and Scarcella were found guilty, while Mario was found not guilty. The other 2 men were deported. Mario feared for his life. We can see this in his police statements when he was trying to tell police the truth regarding the 2 incidents he was involved in. D'Agostino kept approaching him and telling him to lie in court, going so far as to say that if he didn't comply, he would burn his house, wife and child. Because of this, Mario even retracts some of his police statements. I'll just read this out. It says Strano was the person who conveyed Scarcella and Sapiota to the farm of Donata and gave me a statement to this effect. However, at the trial of the prisoners, he would not identify the prisoners as the persons he had driven. He approached me later on the matter and expressed his regret, adding that he had been threatened by D'Agostino, Scarcella and Sapiota that some harm would come to him if he did so. He was very frightened of these men and fearing that some harm would befall his wife and child, he did as they had commanded him. D'Agostino is charged and stands trial for intimidating a witness. Despite the prosecutor Quinn's determination to secure a guilty verdict, the jury lets D'Agostino off. He's clearly involved. Everybody knows he's involved, but there's nothing that can be prosecuted against him. While Mario avoids any major consequences for his role in the trial, prosecutor Quinn's house is mysteriously bombed months later. He survives, but it only serves to deepen his desire to take down D'Agostino and with him the Black Hand. So this is from D'Agostino's naturalisation file as well. It says he's regarded as the squizzy tailor amongst them, having the characteristic cunning of that criminal to be the mastermind but not the actual perpetrator. D'Agostino was eventually killed after a bomb blast tore through his bakery in Ingham in 1938. Like many of these cases at the time, the person responsible was never discovered. When a detective suggests suspects to D'Agostino while in hospital dying of his injuries, he responds that they're all good friends. Another record on my great-grandfather, which I want to show, is his investigation case file. The National Archives holds thousands of correspondence files relating to national security during World War II, with many documenting Italians interned during the war. Mario Strano's file has been digitised and you can view it online. It's 185 pages. He was under surveillance from 1942 to the end of 1944. And this is one of the first pages from the security file, which gives his personal details and provides reasons why the police thought he should be interned. It says the above named is known to me and works as a cane farm near Bemerside. All of Strano's associates are suspects and low-class Sicilians. He's a close associate of former prominent members of the Black Hand Gang. He's particularly undesirable type of individual and a brother of Alfio Strano, internee. He would assist the enemy in the event of an invasion. Detention recommended. So Mario was never actually interned, though his brother Alfio was. I don't know why that is. Okay, many Italians were interned during World War II because the government believed them to be fascist supporters of Mussolini. Concerned members of the public wrote to the Commonwealth with their concerns regarding fascism, often dobbing neighbours in, and many with less than accurate information. This page is from a report by Lieutenant Finzel, interpreter. He's an interpreter, and it's a list of Italians in Queensland that are supposedly connected with the Fascist Party. These pages here are from a file titled War Crimes and Fascist Activities of Italian Prisoners of War. And it lists the POWs that represented the worst of the fascist and disturbing element in the Yanco POW camp. That's in southwest New South Wales. These remarks include a fascist and agitator, a fascist, abusive and bad disciplinary record, agitator against internal compound administrator and malingerer. On the left is a booklet of copies of speeches made by the leaders of the anti-fascist movement when the organisation was formally launched in Melbourne in April 1943. Also known as the Free Italy movement, they called for the end of Mussolini regime and the restoration of democracy. On the right is a list of 50 anti-fascists interned, created by the Woodside Workers' Federation, and their release is being considered in January 1943. Okay, I now want to talk about Italians who enlisted with the Australian forces. Italians and those of Italian heritage played their part in Australia's involvement in both world wars. In World War I, unnaturalised Italians couldn't enlist as they might need to be called up by the Italian government. The first records I'm going to show you are for Giovanni Camillo, who served in World War I. We can see on his attestation paper here that he was 20 years old, he was naturalised, and he was a woodcarter by trade. This is his casualty form for his active service. It shows that he was hospitalised at Gallipoli in 1915. And sadly, it also confirms that he was killed in France in 1917. On the left is a letter to his father in Italy saying that the Star War Medal is in the post. It says, "It is my painful duty to transmit one 1914-15 star as one of the mementos of the gallant service rendered by your son." And we can see the father's address there in Luciana in Italy. On the right is a letter to Giovanni's sister in Victoria, giving details of his death and burial at Pozieres. It says he was killed in action in France and was buried on Pozieres battlefield. Naturalised Italians also served in World War II. Andrea Maniero was born in Italy in 1905. He was a naturalised subject. He was 36 years old, a cane cutter. On his attestation form, it says he was married and enlisted at Mackay. He served in the New Guinea School of Signals from 1941 to 45. It's amazing that while some Italians were serving, others were interned. In the Second World War, many prisoners of war were captured by or surrendered to their allies in Europe and North Africa. They were then shipped halfway across the world to Australia, where they remained for the rest of the conflict. Over 18,000 of them were Italian POWs from the North African theatres of war. This is a photo in our collection of Italian prisoners of war on their way to the prisoners of war camp following their arrival in Australia. That's 1943. Arnaldo Gatti was captured on 6th of Feb 1941 in Libya and arrived in Sydney in October the same year. This is his POW service and casualty form. We have over 44,000 of these cards in the collection located in our Melbourne office. He seems to have been in a fair bit of trouble with the authorities, just sort of lists, goes on, disobeying a lawful command, 7 days detention, willful damage to government property, 14 days detention, willful damage to a garbage tin, loss of pay, using insubordinate language, and it just goes on. And this is the back of that card, and it tells us that he was finally repatriated and he left from Sydney on 3rd of August 1945. So they provide a wealth of information. Another type of record in the collection are the identity cards for Italian prisoners of war from 1943 to 45. These cards were created by the Department of Defence in Queensland. We've got about 200 cards. They've all been digitised, so you can view them all online. The cards were issued to identify the internees as POWs whilst attending work release for various registered employees in the local vicinity. This is the inside of the card. So as you can see, great for family history information. They've got even a thumbprint and photograph. Many Italian POWs were sent to work on farms, and as you can see, it also gives information on where these men were sent to work. So on this card, we've got farms listed at Conondale, Mullaney, Kenilworth and Yamundi. Sometimes POWs will be transferred between camps. This could be for various reasons, including separating escape conspirators, avoiding overpopulation and the demand for workers. Here's a list of Italian POWs that were transferred between Cowra in New South Wales to Gaythorne in Queensland in 1944. Some Italian POWs who took part in the farm labour programs remained or returned to Australia after World War II ended. With the outbreak of both World War I and World War II, the internment of aliens was enacted. Internees were mostly enemy aliens from countries at war with Australia. Internees were held in camps around Australia, often in remote locations. That's a photo on the left there of the Orange internment camp from our collection. When Italy entered World War II, aligning itself with Germany, Australian labelled citizens of Australia from Italian descent as a threat to the nation. The Raw Precautions Act gave the government power to intern Italian descendants for the duration of the war. By the late 1940s, internment camps in Australia housed 20% of the Italian population in Australia, along with other enemy aliens who were residents in this country. This newspaper clipping reports that more than 90% of the Italian population in North Queensland would be disloyal to Australia should the Japanese force a landing, said a Queensland government official today, after returning from Brisbane after taking a census. It was reports such as these that created a push from both the government and the public for the internment of Italians. There are many letters from informants on file, usually from someone dobbing in their neighbour for being a fascist. This is a letter to Parliament House from Innisfail regarding Mrs Signorini, whose naturalised husband and Australian-born son were interned. I'll just read this out. It says, she is most concerned about her son, who was only 20 on the 19th of October and who was interned in a general roundup in March. It seems that she does not know whether he has yet had an appeal. He joined the AIF about 3 months before he was interned and was not 2 weeks in the army before he was discharged on account of having some physical defect, we believe flat feet. He was back only about 3 weeks in Innisfail before he was interned. The mother is Elena Signorini and the father, Renato, who was interned in early 1942, had both consented to the boy joining the AIF. It seems strange that they should have fascist sympathies if they agreed to let the son join the AIF, and in fact, he did join. Okay, so Manlio submitted an appeal regarding his internment. Just read some of this out. This is the chairperson asking, how old are you? He says 20. It says that you are an irresponsible type of young man and that on a number of occasions you have expressed a desire to be in Italy so that you could fight for Mussolini. It is said that you are anti-British and pro-Italian. And Manlio replies, he says, that is wrong, Your Honour. I class myself as good and Australian as anybody else. I was born here and have never been outside the country, and I joined the RAF to fight against them. I have my discharge here. So Manlio was eventually released. It wasn't very straightforward. There was a lot of back and forth on the file between public servants who didn't agree to his release, but eventually he was released, thank goodness, because it's just really amazing reading these files of internees for young people who were actually born in Australia and who were interned. Okay, this is another example of internment. Born in 1893, Anna Mazzocchi arrived in Brisbane in 1927, joining her husband at a farm at Cleveland. That's just south of Brisbane, not far from my office here at Cannon Hill. This gives all her personal particulars. This one says, Mrs. Mazzocchi is an enemy alien, wife of Carlo, internee and leader of a band of fascist farmers in the Cleveland area. This woman has been reported on reliable authority to be even more intensely fascist than her husband. She's a very intellectual type and is in a position to organise a great deal of opposition to the war effort. Okay, so Anna actually asked for voluntary internment, which is very rare. You don't see that on files very often. I'll read it out. It says, my name is Anna Mazzocchi. I'm the wife of Carlo Mazzocchi, who was interned at the outbreak of war with Italy. Up to that time, we had a farm at Thornlands near Cleveland. After my husband went away, I tried to carry on with the farm. The bank has now repossessed it. I'm now living in a house at Ormiston near Cleveland. I'm not adding any money except a few shillings a week for the eggs. I'm living on money I've saved. I'm very lonely where I am and I feel as if I'm an enemy in the district and I want to be interned. I have no children. If my application is granted, I would like to first make arrangements to sell my bit of furniture and other little items that I'm still possessed of. I'm making this application of my own free will on account of the difficult position of which I'm placed in. So a month after her request, she was interned at Gaythorne Camp in Brisbane. And there's the detention order here. We have a letter on file that she sent to her husband. All letters sent between internees or to any internment camp were taken by the censors, and so these are on file. I'll read it out. It says, Dearest Carlo, as you see, I'm also and safe among the guarded, and my only hope is to be able to rejoin you and see you again after such a long time as it is since we've been separated. In this moment, it will be for our common good to be able to see each other and speak to each other sometimes and to help each other, because we could still be of moral and material help to each other. I got ready 2 trunks to bring with me containing all my clothes, particularly winter ones, and also yours. They did not wish to take the trunks because they did not fit in the car, but they have promised me to have them brought by other means. In the trunk, I have a pound of tobacco, which I intended to send to you the same morning on which they came to take me. As soon as the trunks are here, I shall send it to you if I can. I hope you have received the money order for £15. Will they accept my request to be interned near you? This is all that I hope for now, and I shall be almost happy to share with you the unmerited imprisonment. Write here to your old address, Gaythorne. So Anna was actually eventually moved to be with her husband to the Tatura camp in South Australia. They were reunited. And we can see here that she was released on 4th of January 1944 after almost 2 years of internment. She ended up living at Albion in Brisbane with her husband after the war. Okay, after World War II, political and economic instability forced many Italians to immigrate. At the same time, Australia started to drive to encourage migration with its populate or perish strategy. Italians began to come to Australia from 1947 onwards, but the post-war boom really began in 1951 when the Italian-Australian Migration Agreement was signed. Italian migrants could receive heavily subsidised sea fares in return for an undertaking to remain in Australia for at least 2 years after their arrival. Okay, the types of records held by the National Archives relating to immigration include passenger lists, naturalisation files, migrant selection documents, alien registration forms, and immigration case files. These are a few examples on the screen here. They're really amazing for family history research, and some of them contain family photographs. The Assisted Migration Agreement between the Italian and Australian governments was signed on 29th of March 1951. Both governments contributed towards the costs involved, and migrants had to pay about £10 towards the fare. Italian migrants coming under the agreement had to remain in employment for a period of 2 years after their arrival, and after this they could apply for permission to remain in Australia. This is interesting. On the left here, it's got mission to Italy, and it's listing provinces that are likely to produce suitable migrants. And on the right, it's got categories of tradesmen likely to be required for 1951. So it was a very organised scheme. Of course, many arrived to work in the sugar industry in North Queensland. And I really like this advice here that I found in a file relating to one of the voyages of the ship Flaminia, which arrived in 1955. It says health advice to cane cutters in the sugar industry. It says the purpose of this leaflet is to help you over the first few weeks hardening up period, which follows the change of occupation from an easy life to hard work. Prevention is better than cure. Heed this advice, which is based on long experience, and you will have a much better chance of avoiding discomfort from the change. This will increase your earnings by your not being absent from work and your ability to work harder, since a cane cutter is paid by results. So this would have been handed out to people on the voyage. It talks about the Queensland climate, and it talks about what sort of clothing you should wear in this climate. I like this. Cuts, abrasions, take care. Your cane knife is sharp. Do not be careless. As soon as possible, dab the injury with tincture of iodine or other antiseptic and cover with elastoplast. And it's got wrist jarrings at the bottom there. A weak wrist can only be strengthened gradually. It is wise to start off with an old, partly worn cane knife. Don't get the idea from the above that cane cutting is unhealthy work. It is not. Cane cutters are an extremely healthy group of workers working in the sunshine and open air. But prevention of ills is far better than cure. Okay, this image is of the Aurelia, which arrived in Cairns in 1956. I love how the Department of Immigration labelled their photos. It says the gleaming white Italian migrant liner ties up at the Cairns wharf in warm tropical winter sunshine. On board were 1,200 Italian migrants attracted to Australia by high wages, universal 40-hour week and full employment. At Cairns, 552 brawny cane cutters and 100 women and children left the ship. The rest left the ship at southern ports. So we have a file in our collection on the Aurelia, and it documents the process that the migrants went through. The boat arrived during the day, but it was well into the night before the passengers were en route to the migration centre. They had to undergo health checks, x-rays, baggage inspections, alien registration, employment allocation. They had to have their shoes fumigated. It was a lengthy process. Okay, and this is the list of workers that arrived on that ship, and we can see that it lists the 512 cane cutters who arrived at Cairns. And this is the nominal roll on that file. So this is what passenger lists look like. So list the name of the person, their date and place of birth. And this one, it tells us that there's 512 cane cutters and 460 of those are single men. I love the photographs. Again, they're very nicely described. So it's got here from the wharf, kinsmen who with earlier migrants shout greetings. Italian cane cutters arrive on the Aurelia. Down the gangway stream the newcomers to set foot for the first time on their new chosen land. Customs men go through migrants' baggage, and unpacking at a migrant camp is no trouble for this youngster, bottom right there. In a few days, his father will start cane cutting in the nearby fields. This is officials welcoming the migrants, and the cane cutters are boarding a bus to go to the migrant camp in Cairns. And the bottom right, mothers give their bambinos their last meal on board ship. This one's titled The Gang Strides Towards the Crop, and the bottom photo, the first gang of cutters reports to the cane grower's house for work. I love this one. Next morning, the young cane cutters take their first stroll down the street. This is a great photo too at Townsville Quarantine Station for clearance. This is another ship, the Flaminia. Okay, this was a really interesting letter I found on the file. It's relating to immigration. It's titled Migration of Italians to Australia from 1948 to 62. This is writing to the minister. It says the chief quarantine officer in Melbourne has reported that his officers there have found widespread smuggling of salami and olive oil tins included in the personal luggage of Italian migrants. A number of these oil tins have been found to contain salami attached to the inside of the tin by metal straps soldered at each end. I love it. Italian migrants bring salami to Australia in their personal luggage. Their reasons for doing so are understandable. They cannot, however, realise that they risk bringing here certain animal diseases from which Australia is happily free. And on the right, there's a letter there basically saying, thank you for letting us know. We've brought the matter to the attention of the authorities in Italy, who will advise migrants against such unlawful practices. Okay, I'm just going to show you some examples of migrant selection documents for people arriving on the various ships. This one's for the ship Aurelia that we saw the photo of in Cairns. This is from a series of records in our Canberra office, and this is on the DeSantis family. Each of these records contains a medical report, an agreement about the conditions of migration, questionnaires which talk about their employment, talks about the migrant's family group and lists their parents, has passport photos. So they're really wonderful records. And that is such a cute photo of that little baby there. These are some more personal records relating to migrants on the assisted passage scheme. These are from our collection in Queensland. Many of these migrants travelled to Australia on the ships, the Aurelia, the Toscana and the Flaminia, and they were employed on the cane fields of North Queensland. This is the Stefano family, and this is their record. So as you can see, it's got their medical reports, photographs, their proof of identity documents in Italian. So they're a rich resource of information. All of these records have been digitised and you can view them online and you can do a name search in our database to find them. Okay, migrant hostels were established after World War II to accommodate displaced persons, and the Wacol Migrant Centre in Brisbane was many Italian migrants' first port of call. There were also centres in Townsville and Cairns. This is a photo here on the right actually of the Minister for Immigration. He's being served a plate of salad by Italian chef Pietro Gallo. It's 1957. Those passing through the Wacol Migrant Centre had their own Migration Centre history card. Again, a wonderful resource of information. Gives us, you know, the name of the ship they arrived on, the date of arrival, particulars of their children. So they're really wonderful records. Another type of record documenting Italians are the alien registration papers. So between 1916 and 1926, and again between 1939 and 1971, immigrants to Australia who are not British subjects had restrictions placed on them in the interests of national security. So this was generally during World War I and World War II. the Commonwealth required aliens to register with the local authorities. And so because of this, we've got these amazing records in our collection. So aliens were defined as anyone born or belonging to another country who had not acquired citizenship through naturalisation. This is what an alien registration card looks like. So you can see it's got their occupation, the name of their employer and their address. So they had to notify the authorities anytime they changed occupation or their or where they lived. So these pages here come from a family called the Frau family. It's their main immigration case file. It's 114 pages. So the immigration case files can be quite large and they contain a wealth of information, as you can see on the screen. It's often relating to their application for naturalisation as well. This one here's an application by Andre Frau for his wife and daughter to come to Australia. We can see on the form at the time that Andre is a butcher, and we can see that his wife and child are still living in Italy. So often the men came out to Australia, established themselves and sent for their wife and children later on. There's over 130,000 of these files in our Queensland office. And this is what the application for naturalisation looks like. That's Andre's Frau application from 1978. Okay, I'm just quickly showing you some photos here and the application for alien registration for an Italian woman named Antonio Bellamarino. She was chosen to represent the 250,000th Italian migrant to immigrate to Australia since World War II. And the photos are titled, "A Film Star Welcome Greeted Mrs. Antonio Bellamarino when she arrived in Melbourne with her family on January 25th, 1963. So they gave her a big banquet on board the ship. They've got the immigration minister there, Mr. Downer, presenting her with a gold watch and an Australian-made cutlery set. Okay, this is our website. I've just circled here in red the record search database. So if you want to do a search for records on Italian migration, you can go into record search and search for a person's name. And if you need help with your search, just click on that Help with Your Research button. This is what our database record search looks like. You can do a basic search or a name search, or you can search for passenger arrivals. So this is the results that I got from searching for Paolo Frau. There's 3 records here in Brisbane relating to her alien registration. And I've also circled one of the records that are digitised. So when you see that paper icon, that means you can view the record online when you click on that button. Okay, so like I said, if you're having difficulty finding records on the database, please reach out to us. We have question types on our website in the Ask Us About the Collection section. Just put in as much detail as you can about your inquiry and the person you're looking for, and we'll do a search for you and get back to you. Just finishing off with this, I really like this. It was found in a Postmaster General's department file in Queensland, so not somewhere I would usually go to look for Italian records. And it was used in post offices in North Queensland, and it's a list of English phrases or words with equivalent in Italian. So, you know, do you want to register this? Do you want to insure it? What does this parcel contain? So really interesting document on a post office file. Okay, that's the end of my presentation today. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.